Welcome to Flickers from the Fringe, an ongoing video series which explores the nature of truth as it relates to the current pandemic gripping the planet. This is not an exhaustive, definitive guide, but a series which invites an open-ended, collaborative effort from viewers to reach a fuller understanding of our current crisis. So if you have helpful contributions or clarifications to make to any of the information presented, contact information will be available at the end of this video, and all constructive feedback is appreciated. This video looks at some of the pitfalls of current-day diagnostic testing as it relates to infectious disease. Robert Koch, as a bacteriologist in the late 19th century, established 4 postulates that must be satisfied before conclusions can be drawn about whether a particular microbe produces a specific disease or not. His work, ostensibly still followed today, forms the gold standard in infectious disease research. Koch, working in the pre-electron microscope era, championed these postulates for bacteria. It would be years later, however, before empirical evidence of viruses became available. Scientists, though, have theoretically at least implicitly adopted his paradigm for viral research, agreeing for at least the last 100 years that the presence of all 4 of these are required to determine an infectious etiology. Have modern-day studies in infectious disease incorporated these? The answer, unfortunately, is a resounding no. The medical research community has conveniently ignored a very basic premise upon which the research findings supposedly solidly rest. As a result, one of the most widely used diagnostic tests in infectious disease, the polymerase chain reaction test, or PCR, delivers virtually meaningless data with regard to identifying a causative agent in infectious disease. The polymerase chain reaction test, or PCR, delivers virtually meaningless data with regard to identifying a causative agent in infectious disease. Accurate false positive and false negative rates cannot be determined when any of the 4 postulates have been omitted. Correlation does not mean causation. Think of it this way. If you're walking down the sidewalk and encounter someone badly injured and bleeding, and I then arrive on the scene, can I assume that you were the attacker? PCR testing, sometimes referred to as molecular photocopying, involves looking for specific DNA fragments found in a host's cells, which are presumed to be specific to a certain microbe. Using this analogy, we could conclude that chimpanzees and humans are the same animal, based on finding DNA sequences in both that are identical. Highly sensitive, the test is subject to inaccuracies due to a number of reasons, including, but not limited to, improper sample collection and transport, insufficient amount of the specimen, degradation of the nucleic acids during storage and transport, presence of amplification inhibitors in the specimen, and contamination of the sample, among others. Further, positive test results can arise from the presence of dead organisms and does not necessarily imply contagion is likely or even possible. In 2008, my then partner and I got tested for HIV after being together for a few months. Both tests came back negative. About 4 months of monogamy later, he unexpectedly became quite ill with a high fever, aches, and a cough. I drove him to the local ER, and in the course of his evaluation, another HIV test was run. A few hours later, when the physician blitzed in with the words, "Your test came back positive and you have AIDS," our world turned upside down. Because I had no reason to question the results, I assumed my partner had not been forthcoming with me about his behavior. The cognitive dissonance created an enormous strain on our relationship at a time when we most needed support and understanding. He spent about a week in the hospital, including some time in ICU. Following discharge, yet before beginning protease inhibitors, 2 other HIV tests were run. They both came back negative. After testing positive and being diagnosed with AIDS, yet before starting antiretroviral meds, he tested negative not once, but twice. Apart from the PCR testing limitations, ELISA testing, along with Western blot, used respectively to determine the presence of antibodies to specific antigens and specific proteins, has for years been used to assess whether exposure to and implied immunity to a specific antigen is present. Once HIV became known as the undisputed virus causing AIDS, however, a positive result, rather than indicating immunity, suddenly became the benchmark for the need for treatment. How did this occur and why? What medical explanation can be given to explain this contradiction? One day we're told that the presence of antibodies means we're immune, and the next we're told that it means we need treatment. So, what does all of this mean within the context of empirically supported data? Because the scientific method has not been followed, the conclusions widely drawn about the reliability and validity of the current test results reported in mainstream media cannot be substantiated. A future video will look at some possible reasons why. Thank you for listening. My name is Steve Smith, and I work in the Denver metro area providing bodywork, nutritional consults, and spiritual support. Feel free to reach me at aquestfortruth2020@gmail.com. Together, we can uncover the facts, diminish fear, and bring hope and healing to the planet.